Hi,
Can you hear me?
Angelina. How are
I'm doing well. How are you? Of
you? I'm great. I just want to say thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you here
course.
today. And as I mentioned before, we have a total of like 20 to 25 students ready to learn about your career, your decisions, and what you do. So I would appreciate if
Absolutely.
you could, introduce yourself and also introduce your professional background. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, guys. My name's Angelina Corey Sater. I am currently a technology consultant at Worldwide Technologies in DC. So that's why I kind of changed my background to DC. My background is I got my bachelor's in computer science in 2023, and I was in a dual degree program. And I actually met Val during that time at a conference we both went to. And I did a dual degree program at getting my MBA, so my master's in business administration, as well as my bachelor's within those 5 years. So I graduated with my MBA this past May. Um, so pretty much a recent grad. And I just moved to DC about a month ago. But super excited to talk to you guys today about, what does it mean to be in technology? I involved in robotics growing up, and was also a student athlete. So there's definitely ways to do both and everything in between. So excited to talk to you guys.
Yes, awesome. So I know that for your bachelor's, you did computer science. So
Yeah.
can you explain to us what computer science is? What does that look like? What do you usually do if you're in that field?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the field of computer science, the typical route is that you'd go ahead and be like a software engineer, and probably go code for some sort of company. I'll say during my time, I decided to focus on AI. I'm sure you guys are using ChatGPT, definitely know what ChatGPT is, or using some sort of a version of it. And so that's really what I focused on during my studies. During my bachelor's in computer science, I knew personally I didn't want to go code. That wasn't something that was really my specific interest. And so I was trying to find crossover of like knowing how the code works, and how to implement it, and hopefully being able to like manage people who might be coding one day.
Great. So then, and then for your master's, you said that you did an MBA. So can you explain to us what that is? And I know that you had a concentration, I believe, in entrepreneurship and data
Yeah.
analytics. What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to talk about that. So my MBA is my master's in business administration. It's typically a 2 year degree, depending on where you decide to go pursue your MBA. I definitely was on the younger side of getting my MBA. So I graduated with my MBA at the age of 23, which is not your typical age. But I'll say during my time, I got to focus. You look at overall business, right? So you're going to take your finance course, you're going to take business strategy. Our MBA program just opened an AI center, so we're really focusing on like the technology aspect. I did, as Val mentioned, take a lot of entrepreneurship courses because I'm really interested in having my own startup at some point. Not really sure what I'm doing, but more than happy to talk to any of you guys about that as well. And really look at the data analytics side just because I have the computer science background. Data analytics is a hugely growing field. And so that was an area of interest for me as well.
So what is that data analytics? Like, what do you do when you are in that field?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of these things kind of sound far out there, and you're like, all right, like, what's the job, right? Like, what would my day to day look like? A lot of data analytics. I mean, if we bring it down to a company level, how many of you guys know Nike? Raise your hands. Do you
Say
guys
that
know
again.
Nike? How many of you guys know what Nike is? Raise your hand.
The company, right?
Right? Yeah, right. The company, or you guys are probably wearing their shoes or some sort of gear. All right. So let's say we're working for Nike and you're doing data analytics for them, and maybe they're tracking to see how many people are buying their black and white panda dunks, right? So looking at how many people are maybe visiting their website, how many people are clicking through it, how many people maybe bought the shoes, but then also looking at how many people didn't buy the shoes, right? And saying, maybe why did they buy the shoes? Did they go look at something afterwards? Did they buy the shoes and then maybe buy a matching sweatshirt? And so a lot of that's a really key example of, how companies are using data analytics to like better understand their consumers. So me and you, when, we go to shop, what are we thinking? How are we thinking? And how are we making our decisions?
Oh, that is amazing. So when did you know that you were interested in going into the STEM field?
Yeah, for me, it definitely started a lot younger. I didn't know I wanted to do it. I'll say that my dad and our family friends really pushed me into it. They had a local robotics team, and so I started doing robotics in seventh grade, and so I really got kind of thrown in the deep end of the STEM field. And so to give you guys a background on robotics, the program I was in was you have a different challenge to solve every year. So our first year, it was called Senior Solutions. And so we built our robot on like a playing course, think about like an obstacle course, and had to do all these things and get all these points, and hopefully beat the other team and get more points than them, like any other game. But there's also the flip side of it, which is a little more strategy in terms of, right, we have the problem with senior solutions, like how can we create and develop solutions for seniors, that we know, that we have heard about, rather the general population, and make their lives better. And so with that, that was kind of the kickoff. And so I did that all the way till I was a senior. So we ended up winning worlds my junior. And so within that, right, like you meet so many people, we go to a lot of different conferences and different competitions. And a lot of those kids that I grew up getting the program with are still my closest friends. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's amazing. And can you tell us, like, what are some of the skills that it is needed or required for you to be, successful in the STEM field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the first one is just like an eagerness to learn. I think within STEM in general, it's such a developing field, right? If you think about AI when you guys were growing up and when I was growing up, like I'm sure it was a thing, right? But it wasn't something we talked about. So it's something you have to be super open to learning, right? And that's kind of in any field. Great skill to have, right? Because your field's always going to change. No field is going to be really staying the same for your entire career. So, right, keeping up to date, reading, attending conferences, and even just talking to your friends, right? Like what's going on, right? Like what's going on in the world, what's happening within this specific field is really important. I think within STEM, I think just determination, right? It's not, I would argue, the easiest field. I had 13 core classes to my major that I took, to graduate, and I decided did that in 2.5 years. So say it was a hard feat. Was it worth it? Absolutely yes. So being really determined and like keeping your eye on the prize, right? Like that's what you really want to do. Really not letting anything get in the way of that, I would say, is really important.
That's amazing. So now that you were talking about AI, I know a
Yeah.
lot of people that work in the computer science field, and now they feel like with AI, like maybe they won't have a job. Like, how do you feel in regards to like AI and like the job market and those things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really interesting. So the company I'm working at, we have our own version of ChatGPT. And right, it's not to replace my job. It's not to replace my managing director's job. It's not to replace anyone's job. It's to help make our lives a little more efficient, right? If I don't have to spend, I'll tell you something I used it for yesterday. I was pulling references and we needed them in APA citation. You guys know all citations, right? How many of you guys have cited a paper? Raise your hand.
Okay,
Right?
that's one
Okay,
too.
almost. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like sometimes like you just don't. It takes a little bit of time. And so I went into our chat GPT and I put it in and I said, hey, can you give me the in-text citations and the APA citations for works cited? And it did what I could have probably done in maybe like 10, 15, 20 minutes in 2 seconds, right? That meant I had an extra 20 minutes to go do something else that might benefit our business in a different way. And so I think there's a lot of fear in terms of like, it taking people's job. I think it's going to change the job market in a lot of ways. I think there's going to be daily tasks that me and you might not want to do one day, right? I don't want to sit there and copy and paste something 100 times and I can have Chat GPT do it, right? Now I can go do something more meaningful or more creative, and just use my time, a little bit differently.
100%. And what would you describe the difference between getting your bachelor's and getting your master's? And can you also go into what were some of the extracurricular activities I did? I know that you were an
Yeah.
athlete. Yeah, talk about that as well.
Absolutely. We can talk about that. So just going to the distinction between like your master's and your bachelor's, right? Getting your bachelor's is an amazing achievement in and of itself. So especially if you're in the STEM field, I will definitely clap for anyone who does achieve that. That's awesome. I'd say your master's is right. It's a step up the same way, right? You're in high school now. College is a step up. There's a higher expectation, and level of independence in terms of what you do, right? In your master's, we had a lot more flexibility, and ability, room to be a little more creative in terms of how we approach things. We weren't given, a rubric in the same way you need to check all these boxes. It's like, here are the key guidelines, like create something within this sphere. So I'll say my master's, your MBA, I had so much fun. with given that much room and ability to create, what did I want my MBA experience to be like? And I think linking that into extracurriculars, I think both of my degrees were definitely leveled up in the sense that I was super involved on my campus. And I don't know how involved you guys are at your local schools, but I'll say that I was a 5 year Division 1 and Division 2 student athlete. So I ran Division 2 cross country and was our captain of our Division 1 sailing team at Rollins in Orlando, Florida. So that's where I grew up, and that's where I did go to school. So for me, those were really critical to what I did. I was also involved in different honor societies, and really joining those communities were key for me, right? To have that social community of people like I can lean on, right? I know Val and I met at a conference. I'm not sure if she told you guys, but right, all those opportunities where you get to meet like-minded people who have, right, whatever organization you're in, you have one common interest. You're starting with one common interest, right? If you're an athlete, you like that sport or you're really good at that sport, and really building those communities are, I would argue, key to success and me being able to achieve my bachelor's, right? They weren't helping me in class per se, but right, having that community support you in and outside of the classroom is really critical.
So how were you able to be a part of so many communities and so many, extracurricular activities and still be able to keep up your GPA? Because you had a very high GPA, both the bachelor's and also the master's. So how was that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say key is being organized and having really good time management skills. I think that's something I was really lucky to be able to develop during my high school experience because I was pretty involved and still an athlete during my high school experience. So I'll say I told Val this before. My Google Calendar is my best friend. Do any of you guys know what a Google Calendar is? It's like an Apple Calendar, or yeah, okay. So I book everything in my Google Calendar. So I tell people if it's not in my Google Calendar, it doesn't exist because right, I can't keep it all in my head. If you ask me to keep tomorrow all in my head, I bet you I am going to forget at least one thing that I was supposed to get done. And so for me, right, blocking out my time, if I know that I have a research paper to write, I know I need to block out maybe 2 to 3 hours, like I put that in and being really strict about that. Because sometimes, I mean, there's definitely times when my friends would go out to dinner and I'm like, I would love to go, but I know that I have these 5 things that need to get done before tomorrow. And so, really being able to prioritize that is really important. And so, it's manageable, it's doable, but you really do have to be pretty diligent about it.
Right. And going back to, being with like-minded people, how important do you think that your success was adding to being part of this community and being with like-minded people? Because I have had times that, in my college experience, I've also had people say, hey, let's go to a party, or hey, let's go, as you said, let's go out to eat dinner, let's do this, or let's skip classes. So how important it is to get those people for you to be able to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is just it's so critical. Like I don't even, I want to put a percentage on it and I don't want to put 100%, but I think it really, your circle of influence has so much
Okay.
of a later result on like what that experience is going to be like for you, right? If you're surrounded by people who are telling you to skip class, statistically, you're probably not going to do that well in that class because you're not going to be going one, and then you might not be as focused on doing your homework, and you might not do as well on the test because you're not going, right? Compared to if maybe you're friends with some people in your class, or your other friends are all going to their classes, and you guys all go study together, and you guys all go to office hours with your professor together, right? The two outcomes of those are polar sides of the spectrum. And so I think for that, it is really critical to decide, right, who are around you. I don't know if you guys have heard the quote, right? The 5 closest people to you can kind of tell a person who you are. And so I think that's really critical when thinking about, who is around you and who's influencing you.
I love that you said that because they're currently in high school. They might be going to high school, and I feel like people just think, let's just be friends. It doesn't matter how you are, but it really does because with the people that you're with, there's some traits that you become wanting or not. You speak it up unconsciously, right? So as you said, if this person's always skipping class, one, they might not be as successful in that class, and you neither because you're also skipping classes with them, right?
Yeah.
But then now I want to go and talk about your internship experiences. How were you able
Yeah.
to get those internships, and how has also mentorship, impacted your success and how you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say that I knew wanted to move back to Washington, D.C. So you guys see the Capitol behind me. I guess it's kind of funny that's behind me. So I actually interned there when I was a sophomore in college. So I lived in Washington, D.C. for 6 weeks, and I lived and worked essentially at the Capitol. So right, whether that was meeting with constituents, if you guys went to your local representative, you guys can meet with them in the Washington D.C. Capitol in their respective offices. Running bills down, writing legislation, sitting down in committee meetings. So if you guys have ever watched a committee meeting online, so I was sitting in those rooms, right, kind of taking notes down for our representative, and so that was a really impactful experience for me, just because I had this innate urge, right? I think you guys really have to figure out, I'd say it's key to figure out what is your passion, right? Like what makes you happy to like wake up and go do that every day. Like I was so excited to go do that every day. I think we had to be there at like 8 a.m. and we might have been there till 6. But honestly, right, you want to find a job for you that doesn't feel like work in the nicest way. Like obviously you're being serious about it, but something you're really passionate about doing that you're hopefully not really going to get tired of. And so I'll say after that, I went back to school and I started my MBA. And so this past summer, I interned over at Siemens Gamesa. And so we're a renewable energy company. So how many of you guys know what a wind turbine is? Is know what a wind turbine is? Okay. You guys know what wind turbine is. You guys can explain it to Val later on. And so I worked for a company that works on developing wind turbines all over the world. And so I worked on our supply chain finance team. And the easy words, that means all those parts that are within those wind turbines, I was tracking the numbers from year to year. So seeing if in 2023 it was $12 for a screw, let's say, and in 2024 it's $20, what happened within that. And so really working on our finance team. And so with that, my mentorship was super helpful. Our school did a really good job at having this pairing program that they called Career Champions. And so you would apply, and we had all the mentors apply, and there was a pairing system where you would get paired with a mentor. And my mentor and I are still talking 2.5 years later, and she has been so impactful in my career. So I think finding people who are doing things you want to do or people you would like to be like, right? I would argue she's like my best friend, but right, having them within your circle of influence is so helpful to help you get where you want to go later on.
I agree 100%. So then I have another question. What do you do if your school does not have a mentoring pairing opportunity? Like, how do you go out of your way and find a mentor? And how do you even know
Yeah.
if that person is the right mentor for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say if you don't, here are two things I would do. First,
Mm-hmm.
do you guys know what LinkedIn is? Has Val talked to you guys about LinkedIn?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Okay. They're shaking their heads. Okay, good. So that's one way I will say I would pursue it, right? Finding people within certain industries. So let's say let's go back to Nike. Let's say I know I want to go back to Nike. And let's say I know I want to go work within their computer science department. You can go in and search for that. And you can find people who work there within the roles that you want to be in. And right, it's going to sound really silly. And I promise people say yes way more than you think. You just write them a message. And so mine might say, like, hi, I'm Angelina. I'm a computer science graduate, really interested in working at Nike. And I saw that you're working in this role. Do you have a few minutes to chat? And so within that, right, I can learn more about the company. If that's something I'm interested in actually working at, maybe this is someone who will say, hey, I'm more than happy to mentor you. I'm happy to give you a referral into the company, this, that, or the other. And I'll say the other side of that in terms of something else I would do is right attending different conferences, right? If you decide that you want to go be a doctor, there's plenty of medical conferences all over the US, all over the world, right? Just finding those opportunities, or maybe even clubs or organizations or societies within that. I know that's something I'm actively doing in DC just because I've moved, right? Finding those professional networking organizations. Because something I'll also say is that you have no clue, right? All the people sitting next to you right now, one of them in this room could be hiring you one day, right? You might be moving to their company or you might be hiring them, right? You have no clue. So even in those organizations, right? I might not want to be in their field today, but maybe in 20 years I do want to be. So just making sure you're making those connections and not getting super niched. And so I guess I hit on the second part of the question. In terms of, right, let's say this mentor isn't a right fit for you, I'll say that I've had a personal experience with this. And I paired with a mentor, and I thought it was gonna be a really great match, and it really just didn't. I don't think it was mutually beneficial for us in terms of the mentorship and the skills that they brought to the table and the skills that I think I was looking to kind of fill in the gap, as well as, like, how can I better support that? And so with that, I think, just having the conversation, and kind of transitioning away. Because I think part of it's like trial and error. You have no clue until you go have that conversation with that person. And so there's no like easy way to know, like, is this going to be a really great mentor for me? Because even with my mentor I'm really close with now, like, I don't know, when I first met her, like, I couldn't have told you we're going to be where we are today. I don't know if she could have told you that. Maybe she could have. Um, but it's really trial and error with that.
100%. And when it comes to the mentorship, or when it comes to professional networking, how do you follow up with a person? So let's say we meet at a conference. How do you follow up? How do you make sure that this person network?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I typically do, and so it's a little bit different. I guess we'll talk about it in two different senses. We'll say from a conference where people my age were going. So I'll explain how Val and I met. Val and I were at the same conference, and we were going to be there for a couple days. I met her on night one, and so I gave her my number, right? Because we're kind of the same age. It was a little bit different. I'll say on the flip side, let's say you're in a professional setting, you went to a professional conference, you're a medical student talking to a doctor, you might connect with them on LinkedIn, see what their preferred method of communication is. It might be email, it might be phone number. A lot of them will kind of hint at you what it is. But typically within those professional settings, I'll just go ahead and my LinkedIn, and Val, I'm sure can teach you guys this. You guys can create a QR code, and so I just screenshot that QR code and have it up on my photo. And, I'd say, I'd love to connect with you. Here's my LinkedIn. Or I'll go ahead and get theirs and then message them and say, maybe later that night, depending on the time, or maybe tomorrow morning, it'd be like, hi, it was so nice meeting you, Val. I really enjoyed our conversation, hoping we can stay connected in the future. And so, right, maintaining those conversations is really critical as well, right? So, I haven't seen Val in 2 years now. Is it 2 years?
Yeah, year and a half,
Okay, 2 years
2 years.
now, right? But right, if I see something that makes me think about her, or something I know that's within her area of interest, or there's some crossover, I'm like, hey Val, right? Like, those check-ins are also just as important, because you can't just make the connection and then drop it, right? If you make it and then drop it, there's no value getting added to either one of you. And so let's say you need something 5 years down the road, it's a little bit harder to get a yes if they don't really even know where you are at that point as well. Does that all make sense to everyone?
Makes sense? Yes. So then I had a question.
Perfect.
So your internship experience, you work at a capital, and then you went from finance, legal to like finance, and now back to
Yeah.
computer science. Why did you decide
Yeah.
to explore different fields for the internship experience? And I
Yeah,
just like
absolutely.
get it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'd say the first thing I was always told my internship experiences is one, do stuff you're passionate about. But two, also, right, use it as a trial. Essentially, internships, easiest definition I will give you guys, it's like a trial for what the job might look like, right? So I'm testing out the company, saying, hey, do I like this company? Do I like how they function? Do I like the people at this company, right? Because company culture, and I know I wasn't thinking about this back in high school, but it's so, so critical, right? You have to be able to work in a positive working environment. I can say I very much found that, and I'm very fortunate to have found that. But for me, as I slightly mentioned before, working on the hill was like a passion project, I guess, for me. It was something I've always wanted to do. I think COVID was a little bit different for me because that impacted me during my college experience. So I was supposed to do that my first year, and it got pushed back to my second year. And so for me, it was right finding things I was passionate about, right? I worked on the hill. For me, long term, I didn't see me doing it full time, but it was still something I really enjoyed, right? And so it's something I'm always going to keep in the back of my mind. If there's a really cool job offer, maybe I'll pursue it one day. I don't know right now. But for me, right, also pursuing finance, because my MBA was really doing a ton of finance. I wanted to see if I was going to be good at it. It was lower stakes than me, let's say, perhaps taking a job and then not liking it and then having to leave the company. And so for me, really just using all these experiences as different like trials. Like, is this something I could do or want to do in the future? And so for me, long term, I learned throughout my MBA that I really wanted to be a consultant. And so being able to pair my tech background with computer science and STEM background. We have a ton of people within various fields of STEM at our company. Being able to bring that into the business world was the perfect crossover for me.
So why and when you decided to be a consultant? Like, how do you know based on those experiences?
That's a great question. So during my MBA, I'll give you guys a little background. We did 3 days of boot camp. And so, first day, we walk in, you get told who your team is. So, imagine you guys are split into 6 different teams in that room. There'll be 5 or 6 to you, or 4 to 5 of you guys in different teams. Okay. Then, let's say a C suite executive from Nike walks in. So, let's say their CEO walks in, says, "Hey, we're at Nike. We're having an issue with selling blue sweatshirts. Can you solve this problem for us?" So, that was my day one. All right. Then you're told you have 24 hours to come up with a couple PowerPoint slides to explain to them what is the problem, how do you solve it, and how are they going to do it, and why should they take your alternative. So that was day two. We gave our pitches. And so after that, I sat down with my professor that led that. And I asked him, I was like, hey, like, I really love this. What is the job? Right? When you talk about business strategy, there's no like job title that says business strategist in the same terms of like what I was looking for. And so I learned that's the field of consulting. That's never something that I was taught within my computer science degree. I think within my computer science degree, I was kind of told, you're a software engineer and that's who you are. And that's kind of what you have to be with this degree, which is so not true. So, first of all, so not true, total myth. You can do so many things with the degree itself. Um, but for me, that was kind of this is what I want to do. And so that was something I actively pursued for the next year and a half. So I applied back to this company this past August, so about a year ago now. And I did 7 interviews to land the role I'm in right now.
7 interviews? And how
Yes.
was the interviewing process? And then also talk about personal branding and the importance of it when making first impressions and you know
Yeah. Absolutely. So the 7 interviews, I'll say it was a lot. But I think the biggest part about any interview you're going to be in, and so this is just general advice, not even talking about jobs specifically, is that as much as the person, right, there's the power dynamic, right? For you guys, like if you have a manager and then you have you guys, right? I feel the same way still. I'm not, I don't feel anything differently than you. So one, recognize that. But two, recognize that as much as that manager or whoever is interviewing you, you're interviewing them. You need to realize that. That was something I really realized within the whole process is like, they're trying to see whether I fit in their company. I need to think about, do I fit there? Do I want to be within their circle of influence? Are they people who are going to make me better, who are going to put me in a positive environment, make me want to show up to work every day and be super motivated? And so I say within that, that was probably the greatest lesson I learned within my 7 interviews. It was a lengthy process, but I think for me is also making sure that for them, they're trying to make sure I was the right fit for their team, as well as I'm trying to make sure I'm the right fit for them. And so I met with different levels of management, all the way from HR all the way to our partners. And so it really gave me a great sphere of, who would I be working with at every single level. And so,
great.
do you want me to hit on personal branding too? Because I know I didn't really hit on that a ton in that. So within personal branding, I think the biggest thing, so I'll say for me, it was virtual just like this. It would just been one-on-one, right? Let's pretend me and Val were just on this call, and really telling him who am I, right? So maybe it starts with my background. Hey, why is your background DC? Okay, well now I live in DC, right? That was a great starting talking point. Or, what are you doing? Trying to have those fun facts like differentiate you from everyone else. So for me, it was I got my MBA at a really young age, and I have this unique pairing of a computer science and MBA while being able to balance being a full-time student athlete and working and doing everything I was doing at the time. And so really working on your personal branding and right, you're trying to figure out the narrative and like in a one sentence, I want you guys to think about this maybe later. I don't know, Val, if you want to do this with them, but right, try to explain like who you are in one sentence, right? If you to give someone a one-liner of who is Angelina, right? What would that be like for each one of you? So it's something to always think about is right, the way we dress and show up, right? Dressing up for this call, dressing up for an interview, How, right, are you paying attention? Are you slouched in your chair, right? Am I going to go all the way back in my chair right now? That's probably not a very good look. Am I making eye contact with the camera? I know it's a little different in a virtual setting, but all those little things really add up to, how are they going to take in that first impression of you, especially if they're not meeting you. So I haven't met a ton of the people I've interviewed. I've met them again online since starting, just because we're all spread out. So
Okay, great. Um, let's see. I had another question.
yeah.
How difficult was it to find your personal branding? Like, how do you know, hey, I'm Angelina, this is how I want to show myself out in the world?
I would say it's not, I wouldn't define it as hard. I would say it's something that you have to continuously do, right? Because in every stage I've been in, I think that branding's changed a little bit, right? When I went from being like an undergraduate to a master's student, there's like a different level that's expected of you, right? You guys are going to feel the same thing. When you go from high school to college, there's a different level that's expected of you. And right, so whether that's me, maybe having to be a little more serious in some situations and right, obviously getting to be goofy with my friends and in those settings, my friends and family, but really trying to like better understand those social cues. I think that is something really, really critical within that.
I think it's huge when it comes to like really understanding the environment, being able to adapt, right? Like code switching, that's
Absolutely.
something that before
Absolutely.
multiple. So my question is, what would you say might have been one of the biggest challenges that you have faced as a woman in STEM? Like, do you see some like misconceptions
Yeah.
or some specific experiences that you had to deal with?
Yeah, definitely have those. So I would say just because I started robotics from a really young age, I had a really interesting background with it because they were always trying to push women in STEM. And it was something I never understood in seventh grade. I don't know why. It was just never something like I felt growing up, which I was very fortunate to feel or not feel in that setting. But I'll say when I got to my computer science classroom, I'm not going to lie to you guys. So imagine you're a class of 30 people. Imagine being, I was one of 14 females. So think about 50-50 split in your first ever computer science class, which is pretty good. Pretty good. Okay. But then let's think 2 years later in your last ever computer science class, you're in a room of 15 kids. You're one of two females in a 15-person class, right?
Huge.
So what happened there? What happened? The demographics totally changed. And right, I think there's a lot of that. And so I did research actually on that for my school about what happened to the drop off of female representation within computer science classrooms, actually using the data from my classes because I saw it firsthand. I was like, right, why are we having this drop off and how can we better support females in this? So there's this whole poster we created, but really talking about, right, whether that's support from teachers and the way we talk about females in STEM and the support we're giving them, creating those support groups slash resource groups for our females within STEM at Rollins. That's something we did. And then third initiative I actually worked on all of last year was an enrollment initiative, right? Focusing and encouraging more female in STEM to come actually apply to our school and how can we create a cohort system to better support them to make sure that they stick with that major, obviously if they want to, because you're allowed to change your major throughout those 4 years to make sure they feel supported and have that community. That's so key because I think it's a lot about the lack there of community. And right when you're in a classroom of one of two females and 13 other males, right, it's really intimidating. It is. And I'll tell you guys that firsthand. So I'm more than happy to chat about that more too.
So, what are some of the misconceptions that people have of women in STEM from your
Um,
experience?
I'll say that I, I I don't want to dissuade anyone from doing this, but right, you definitely hear things like, you know, isn't that too hard for you? Oh, that's really hard. Like, that's really impressive you're doing that. Like, right? Like, I'm doing the same thing as like a male counterpart. Like, our brains are essentially at the same level, right? We have the bio, same brain function level to like have the ability to like take on the same challenges, or right? Like, oh, like, why don't you let them do that? Like, that's the hard part. There's definitely a lot of things in terms of like language, and I think it's making me super mindful in terms of like how do I speak in those situations. And also, how do you respond and how do you support others trying to pursue the same things, or within those same classrooms as you, right? Or also telling people who are saying those things, like, that's not really something you should be saying, right? Because I think some people don't even realize it sometimes, which is really sad.
Great. Now let's open up the questions to the students. I know that they already have some questions for you, so let's just go
Perfect.
one by one and see. Well, William would like to start. William, come in the
Okay.
front because they.
Hi,
And you
William.
say your first name. Okay, you. I think you.
Hi, William. How are you?
My name is William, and I would like to know what age did you started really feeling about STEM?
I will say I started being in STEM when I was, sorry guys, I'm doing some math. Probably 14 years old. I would say I didn't decide to be a computer science major until I was 18 years old when I actually got to college. So there's no direct timeline. If you guys don't know it now, it doesn't mean that it's not the right field for you.
Great, thank you. And now Janaila's next. Go ahead.
I said, how did you find your career in STEM?
She said, "How do you find your career in STEM?" So now that you went to robotics, you have that experience. How do you know that computer science, maybe possibly getting an MBA was the goal too?
Yeah, for me, I really wanted to be a lawyer for a really long time. So I decided that in seventh grade that I wanted to go be a patent attorney. So for me, I needed the computer science major to be able to achieve that dream. So right, keeping that big goal in mind, like we were talking about. Um, but in total, right, for me, I also realized that like it was something I kind of had a skill set in from robotics, and it was something I was really interested in pursuing. But also, right, for me, is finding a career that there was a lot of growth in as well, right? The computer science field and data analytics are like constantly growing, and I promise you that field is not going anywhere. So if you're worried about AI taking it, AI will not be taking that. So for me, that was also a big area of importance as well.
Like you said, the funny thing, when I actually met her, I told her that I'm interested in being a lawyer, and she also mentioned that. So that was very
Yeah.
interesting too. Michaela, can you get up? Or Janela, move back.
Hi, Michaela.
Hi. My question was, how early do you think someone should start to look for a career in STEM in order to be successful?
That's a great question. I don't think that there is a specific number. So, right, I'll tell you, like, I decided to be a computer science major my first semester of college. I was supposed to be a triple major. So I don't think there's a specific age. I don't want to give you guys a number and right, like let's say you're past that number and think like this isn't something I can pursue. I think it's something you can really pursue at any age. I think there's plenty of people now. I mean, people at my company, I was talking to them. One of them went back and got his certificate about 4 years ago, right? And he's probably in his mid 40s, I'll tell you, and decided to pivot his career. So there's no wrong time. There's no right time, I will say. I think really figuring out, testing it out, is this something you're passionate about? And then just full heartedly pursuing whatever that is.
Great.
So anytime is the answer.
Great, thank you. And then get up and say your name because I don't think she can see you. You got it?
I have to get up.
Yes. Yes. You got it.
My name is Jessica. I was just wondering, how hard was it for you to get where you are now?
Okay. Thank you.
You guys have given me some really good questions. How hard is it? There's definitely a lot of hard work. I think looking back at it, it doesn't seem as much work as it definitely was going into it, but I'll say that I definitely know, and I did a lot of reflection post my MBA. Like I could not have done this without like my friends and family. There's no way, right? They were my backbone in all of this on those days. They're right. It's really easy. Sometimes when things get hard, you're like, all right, like I just want to quit, right? Like I don't have to deal with this. Like I'm done. And so really having those support networks, whether that was my teachers, my professors, my family, my friends there to support me, right? They weren't getting the degrees with me, but I owe it all to them. So I'd say it's hard, but when you have those really strong support networks and build them and cultivate them, it makes it way, way easier and makes it very worthwhile too. You guys all celebrate together. So I'll say that is definitely a high moment.
Great, thank you. And then let's see. introduce yourself and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Jemima, and my question is, what inspired you to go into tech?
What inspired you
Great
to go into
question. Well, hi, Jamila. What inspired me to go into tech, I'd say really the push, I'll tell you, our robotics team was made up of people that I grew up with. And so we all went to preschool together when we were 4 and 5. And so they decided to start this robotics team. So I think the inspiration for that was seeing the community when we would go to competitions, right? There might be 30 teams with 5 to 7 people on it, right? Seeing that many people so passionate about what they do, and really seeing people within the working field, right? Saying, like, you guys really love this too. Like, is this something I could be really passionate about? So I'd say what inspired me is watching people do what I think I wanted to do, and really loving it.
Thank you. Jamar, you have a question, right? You don't have one? Okay, looks like they already asked that question.
He does have a question.
You don't.
That's fighting words.
Okay. Willianis, you have a question? Okay. Jamie, go ahead. Stand up and say, your name, who you are.
My name is Jamir, and what was the question I was going to ask?
You have it on paper?
No, not this one. That was going to be another question. I forgot it. Are you proud of what you have accomplished so far?
Well, hi, Jameer. And yes, absolutely. I think that it's a feat in and of itself. I think, right? Something I mentioned earlier, I think just getting your bachelor's is something to celebrate. I think being able to achieve my master's and be where I am is something that there was a lot of hard work that went into it. I'm proud of it, and I hope I made everyone else proud of it too. So
Beautiful. Rodrigo, you have a question?
It was already answered.
Oh, it was already answered. How about you, Mia?
My name is Mia, and my question to ask you is, who inspired you to do the STEM career?
So, who inspired you to the STEM career?
I think if I thought about 2 people, first, my dad's a mechanical engineer. So just growing up in that world, so him and he actually worked at the company that I interned at. So that was a cool full circle moment for me. So I'd say definitely him in terms of just like supporting me and encouraging me to do it, and not quitting on those harder days. I also say that I just had a mentor during college who knew, I wanted to go do patent law, and helped me sit down and actually sat down with me and was like, hey, this is what you need to do to achieve where you want to be, in terms of being a patent attorney, and is really impactful in terms of that to allow me to achieve this.
Great, thank you. Chance, you have a question? Do you have brother or sister? Do you have brothers and sisters that are in the field of STEM?
I do have a younger sister. She's a year younger than me. She pursued a major called Management Information System. So she is half business, half computer science. So yes, so I say she's half in STEM. And she's working within financial consulting as well.
Great. Rodrigo, you have, Alia, you have a question? You already answered your question. Jonathan, you have a question? No? Okay, Miley. You have a question? Okay, let's see. Ariana? And speak loud so they can hear you. You're in the back.
Is this originally what you went to college for?
Is this originally what you went to college for? Same path, different way, right?
Yeah, so the cool thing about consulting is there's no like direct major that you have to pursue to be able to do it. So our company is full of people pursuing consulting, but from all different majors. So for me, I'm able to do a crossover. I'm working on a project with AI right now. So for me, I would say yes. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Christopher?
That was already answered.
That was already answered. JD, you have a question? Okay. Do you have a question? You have another question with you? Do you have one thought?
No, it's just I'm saying, everybody got a question, so why are you saying?
Oh, okay. She has another question. Go ahead, Jessica.
What do you like most about your job?
What do you like most about your job?
That's a good one. I would say the travel aspect. I haven't traveled yet for the company, but it's really cool having clients all over the world. And so the ability to do that while your company pays and you're not paying and you get to travel and do something you really enjoy is definitely going to be the best part.
Great. And then I just have a few questions for you. So
Yeah.
what excites you the more about the future in STEM?
I think that the percentage of females going into STEM and continuing to be in STEM is continuing to increase. I think there's been a greater focus on it and how do we better support females within the field. So I think that's something that's really exciting for me. Seen it on a national level, we've seen it on a global level, but also seeing it right at my home institution and college has been really impactful to me.
Great. And now I know that you moved to Florida, to DC. How has been that move, and have you seen any difference in the professional field in like those two different states?
Yeah, I would say the move took a little bit longer than I thought. I gave myself 5 days to move before starting to work. So just adjusting to life up there, it's a little bit different going from the suburbs essentially to living in like a city where public transportation is a thing. In home in Orlando, that's just like not a thing. Like everyone kind of has a car, and that's like your typical mode of transportation. We don't really have a railway system. And so within that, I'd say from the professional sense, there's so many young professionals in DC. It is like flooded with young professionals, which is like an awesome difference. We definitely have that in Orlando. It's just a little more um separated or like stratified, I would say, right? Just because like there's more land in Orlando, DC is like just way more concentrated. So I think being able to find those people has definitely been a little bit easier. There's, a networking event every night, or right, there's always like something to do in terms of like a social professional networking sphere. And so that's been something that's been really nice for me to be able to tap into during my time there.
Great. And then my last question, what advice would you give to somebody that is in high school that might be interested in the field of STEM, or maybe that they might not be, sure of their capabilities and like their skills to like even be a part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say my number one piece of advice is to one, test it out, right? And so I think within that, whether that's you finding someone that you know, or maybe your parents know, or maybe, Val knows, or someone within your life knows and can connect you to. So let's say you wanted to go into computer science, maybe finding a software engineer and asking, hey, can I shadow you for the day? Or right? And sometimes they can't allow you to shadow just because of privacy things. And right, if they say no to that, saying, hey, can we grab coffee? And can you tell me what a day in your life looks like? I think that's probably one of my favorite questions is trying to, see if I were in your shoes, what would my day look like? So I think with that, test it out. Also just try a little bit of everything, right? I think Val really hit on that in terms of my internships. They were all over the sphere. They weren't all computer science related. So really try things out and you'll figure out what you want to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I just asked you if you can stay there so we can take a picture together.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, class, get up. Come in the corner.
Michael!
Get up. You beautiful people, get in the side so that you can
Hi.
You remember my name?
William.
Michael. William.
There you go.
Thanks, Al. Hi.
Okay. Mia, can you move some of the chairs? And see, Ariana, can you move some of the chairs here too? And can I get some people get on this side too? Yeah, like so Chance, go to that side where my computer is. Yes, you can.
William, go that way.
William, move this way. Mia, you stay that way. Let me see. Let me move some of the chairs. Stay next to William. This is too many people on this side. Some of them are gonna have to go on the floor. And stay. Okay, Christopher, can you get to the middle? Mike, can you also get to the middle? Aliyah, you're shorter, so get to the middle.
Damn. Jordan, you gotta go.
Okay. Let's go.
You go back. You're shorter than me.
We're in the middle. There you go. That's fine. Thank you. Say cheese. Okay, louder. Cheese. Cheese. Awesome. Thank you so much, Angelina. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Take care. And I'll be
I'm James.
you.
Sounds great. Okay. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
I'm James.
Oh!